Welcome to the Champion Up podcast and the Purposeful Live show. I'm your host. My name is Adrian Starks, and I'm excited to have you back for another amazing episode. Before we get started today, make sure you give us that 5-star rating and to subscribe to the show so you can be on the lookout for more amazing content. Today is a fantastic and most uplifting episode I've ever done. I have a powerful businessman on this episode with me, and his name is Mr. Mathew Knowles. And Mr. Knowles, can you say hello to our audience today?
Hello, hello, hello. It's good to see you, Adrian.
It's good to see you, Mr. Knowles.
Last time I saw you, we were in Italy.
Yes, we were. And what an amazing experience that was.
What an amazing experience.
Yes.
It was almost spiritual.
I agree. Certainly agree on that.
Yes, that would be the word I use.
Yeah.
A spiritual, awakening moment.
I had a lot of awakening moments from that trip, and especially the experience that our group had with you. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later too. Absolutely amazing. But before we get started here, you really need no introduction. But for our audience, I'm going to go ahead and give them this introduction for you here, okay? So Mr. Knowles is an author, professor, lecturer, public speaker, entrepreneur, music executive, artist manager, and founder of Music World Entertainment would be the words used to sum up the professional career of Mr. Mathew Knowles. Based out of Houston, MWE, which is Music World Entertainment, is one of the world's leading music and entertainment conglomerates, with record sales exceeding 450 million worldwide. Having worked with Chaka Khan, Earth, Wind and Fire, the OJs, Destiny Child, Solange and Beyonce, just to name a few. Knowles has garnered countless awards for his achievements in business, the music industry, and community partnerships. He has traveled all over the world, including Italy, what we just talked about here, as a keynote speaker, guest lecturer, and panelist at various prestigious universities and events. Knowles is a #1 best-selling author. We'll talk about a few of his books here today, and is currently working on Survivor, the Destiny's Child musical, which is set to open spring of 2020. Welcome to the show, and I'm excited to have you on to talk about what you're up to and the world of music, Mr. Knowles. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Adrian. As you were reading my bio, I was making notes so I can talk to my staff so that they can update my bio. So I'm glad you read that out loud to me. Most of it's correct. There's a couple of things we need to change, but it's really a wonderful day. It's hot, typical Houston, 100 plus.
Yes.
Very humid. But, you know, when you look at from a grand scheme of things, we're very blessed and grateful, I'm sure all of us, to live in a country, even though it has its challenges, and I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yes.
But to live in a country called America and to have good health, those are two valuable assets that I think we have. Certainly can make those better, but we certainly have those.
I love how you start off with that gratitude portion of that, because the first thing people think about is what's not going right, what's wrong. But when we can focus on the idea that we are in a world, in a country where we have a lot of opportunities and the doors are open, but there are challenges too, as with most of life. But when we focus too much on those negative things, you know, we're not going to get very far. So I love that you opened up about that. And it's a reason why you're so successful in what you do, because I know that you face a lot of challenges, but yet you continue to push through them. And speaking of challenges, you know, everyone has known you as the entrepreneur, business owner, and father to two amazing musical geniuses, Beyonce and Solange. You've been the reason behind the success of Destiny's Child and Beyonce's catapult to superstardom, Solange's great success in her music career, and many others. Simply put, Mr. Knowles, you're a pioneer of change in the music industry.
Well, you know, not only do I want to be the pioneer of change in music, but now my focus is even more so being a pioneer of change in our social climate in America today. And how can we bring about social courage to speak up, out, speak against racism, sexism, all the other isms, xenophobia, all the things that people put and make themselves that they're better than one. We have to speak up against that and speak out against
Wow.
It's time for us to do old school, and that's boy count.
Mm.
I grew up in an era in Alabama when if something you didn't like Walmart selling guns,
Mm-hmm.
let's just boycott Walmart and let them feel the economic heat of selling guns. Trust me, they'll change that in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're saying about social courage. And that is something that is missing in today's society. People being unwilling to speak up and to take action after speaking up. And this social courage area is definitely needed. And I appreciate you for bringing that up. And speaking of courage, I had the opportunity of reading your books. And by the way, Mr. Knowles has amazing books. He's a #1 best-selling author, obviously. You have one book that I read that really touched me, and that was Racism of the Eyes of a Child, where it's basically your memoir. And you talk about your childhood and the things that have impacted you that really have allowed you to become the powerful person that you are today. And there's a quote in this book, and you say, when you see those lines as a child, you can spot them even when they're subtle. And that's a powerful phrase. And at what was the age when you first noticed racism or you came into contact with it?
Well, I was 5 years old, and that's how I opened the book. I'll give you the real short version. My mom,
Okay.
my grandmother, during the summers, me and my brother and my mother would go down to my grandparents. They lived on a farm, 300 acres of land. My mother and grandmother got along like water and fire. They just did not get along. This particular night, my mother got into an argument and decided she would take me and my brother. We were going to walk a mile to the nearest relatives. And on the way from the dirt road of our house where my grandparents lived to the main highway, we're walking. That's nothing but the moon. There's no lights on the freeway, on the highway. It's in the country, in a rural part of Alabama. And we began to see these lights and began to hear these horns. They got brighter and louder until the point my mother grabbed our hands and said we needed to get off the road quickly and in the bushes. And then she got on top of me. I'm asking why, because I'm 5 years old and I don't understand. I start crying. She tells me to be quiet. She starts praying. Then she tells my older brother, if anything happened, take your brother, go up under that barbed wire fence and just run as fast as you can. Eventually, the lights and horns passed us by. And then finally my mother feels safe, and we got out of the bushes and out of the woods, back onto the highway. And there were all of these flags littering the highway, and they were KKK flags. We had experienced a KKK rally. Who would have known had they seen this mother and her 2 sons, what would have happened to us? And that's when I realized and asked the question, why? And that's when I understand there's hatred and evil in the world. So that was the beginning for me.
And that's a highly impactful beginning for anybody at that age. I can only imagine how that felt. And you also talk about, the ugly parts of this portion of racism doing discernible damage to many of us, including you. And I remember you discussing you have actually remnants of that of 1963. There's a cattle prod burn on your arm as a memento of its lasting effects and impacts. And the reason why I bring this up is because people always see people such as yourself as very successful and that you've got to this point, but they don't realize the backstory of what happened before that allowed you to build this resilience to get to where you are today so that you can help others build that same kind of resilience. And the other side of this quote is that you said that yet it also formed us or formed you into fighters and against odds achievers. And I can certainly see that about you. And this leads us into your second book here. And this is not in terms of chronological order for our audience today, but I'm just leading us into the second book. And this is the DNA of Achievers, the 10 traits of highly successful professionals. Now, when we were in Italy, I brought this book with me. And I remember smiling to Mr. Knowles and saying, hey, can you sign my book? And he did this. But this book is so powerful because you talk about 10 of the traits of successful people. And I'll label these off here. One is passion. And your favorite quote I use a lot that comes from you is if you live your passion, you never work a day in your life.
That's it.
That's it. I memorized that one. I said, I'm not going to forget that. And the second one of this trait is vision. The third is work ethic. 4 is team building. 5 is planning. 6 is talk to do ratio. I like that one. 7 is learning from failure. 8 is giving back, which Mr. Knowles did with us in our group in Italy. 9 is risk taking. 10 is thinking outside the box. And this was important for all of us to know, because I remember it was in 2018, right? We were in Florence, Italy, and you took out time in your busy schedule to come and speak to our small group that was touring there at the time. Now, for our audience, Mr. Knowles was traveling all around Europe doing speaking engagements, but he took out time to be with us, to share some wisdom and to really help us change our lives. And this is part of the number 8, giving back that he did with us. But he also showed us a lesson during this lecture I'll never forget. It's called Thinking Outside the Box. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of our coordinators the night before had us, after we ate dinner, to go and find an empty box. And we were going from store to store, walking down the cobblestone streets, and we were trying to find a big empty box. We kept figuring out, why are we looking for the empty box? And then we figured out the next day when Mr. Knowles arrived, what that empty box was all about. And I remember the exercises that he did with us, and it made me think, yes, that's what it means. And Mr. Knowles, for our audience today that's listening, when it comes to their accomplishing an idea or dream, why is it important to think outside of the box?
Well, I'm going to share something with you that I did not share with you guys that day.
Okay.
Part of that exercise, and remember you guys spent the evening trying to find a box. Mm-hmm. That was actually part of the exercise. I never told you that.
Oh.
How would you accept someone telling you to do something that in your mind was totally ridiculous and had no meaning? Would you have the faith? Would you have the faith to do it, regardless if you understood why you were doing it? Or would you give reasons as, this makes no sense, why the hell are we doing this? Mm-hmm. What would be your attitude about having someone assign you something that had zero meaning at the time? That was part of the exercise. So I'm curious to hear what the internal conversation was between you in getting the box.
Well, the internal conversation, I know for me, was that, what does this have to do with anything that we're doing tomorrow? I mean, why do we need a box? And then I was thinking, what are we going to do with it when we get the box? So all these questions kept popping up in my head. And I'm like, I don't understand this. Maybe, our coordinator got it wrong. Maybe there was something else that we needed to get. Maybe there's something that we need to put in the box. So I was asking that question, what do we need to put in it? They're like, no, we just need an empty box.
But do you see how often in life and daily we share that kind of belief system?
Like, I can see that, yeah.
Why am I doing this? Mm-hmm. Does this even have relevance?
Mm-hmm. That's so true. Yeah, it certainly had relevance. I mean, I can tell you to this day, I'm still thinking in that term, not thinking in the box, but I'm definitely thinking outside of it. And
because the importance of that's my favorite trait, by the way, is because, as you know, I always ask one person to get in the box. Mm-hmm. I ask them to ask someone else in the room to get in the box. And the reason for that is that we tend to want to be around and be in our comfort zone. And our comfort zone are people that think like us, who look like us, and who financially are like us. Mm-hmm. That's typically our comfort zone. So I asked one of you to get in the box, and then I asked you to ask someone else to get in the box. And then I asked you, well, why did you pick that person? Because if you're negative, then you're going to pick a negative person to be in the box with you. If you're positive, you'll pick a positive person to get in the box with you. And that's human nature.
Yes.
Also something we have to change about ourselves. And then the question that I asked is, I walked around you and I said, walk around this box. And none of you could. And I said, why can't you walk around this box? Well, I feel walls. I feel barriers. I'm running into the other person. Mm-hmm. And often in life, because we do live inside of a box, and I call that box in thinking.
Box in thinking.
Most of the world We're box-in thinkers because we have been conditioned by our parents, by our teachers, by society, by our friends, that what we can and can't do. You can't be successful, Adrian, because you're a Black man. You can't be successful because you're a poor female or because you're a female. You can't be successful because you're gay. You can't, all these reasons of hearing those words like some parents, you'll never be worth anything. We are poor. Why do you think you can go to college? Be crazy? Go and get a job, working on cars. We've been conditioned since childhood to be box-in thinkers. And that's why we have others that are box-in thinkers. But when we change that conditioning, when it changes, it allows you to step out of the box, and it allows you to walk around the box for the first time with no walls. And that's what box-in thinking is about, letting you understand why you answer and why you react and why you do certain things, because you've been conditioned to do that.
Powerful. That think in boxing perspective that people have. And to our audience today, who are you thinking inside the box with? Who you have in a box with is keeping you in the box, and why are you not thinking outside of it? That's where success is, outside of the box. And I know it's uncomfortable, but like Mr. Knowles said, the uncomfortable parts, you got to get outside that box. And if you're going to get anywhere further or grow, and to stop using excuses, stop it.
Well,
Mr. Knowles,
you can't change without it being uncomfortable. You can't change.
That's right.
That's part of being uncomfortable, of actually succeeding and changing. You've got to go through a period of not being comfortable.
I love that. Got to go through a period of not being comfortable. Truly amazing. So, Mr. Knowles, did you have to think outside the box for your career when you went into the music industry and you decided that I'm going to come into this industry and I'm going to not just be successful, I'm going to create different pathways?
I did think that way. And I thought that way because I had experienced it in corporate America. I did 20 years in corporate America. And my last 5 years was a transition period. Okay. And I talk about that because a lot of people are like, well, I want to change my passion. I want to change my career path. And they make a mistake and they do it overnight rather than transition. But I transitioned to my music career. But 20 years of my music career, I still look back and pinch myself because it wasn't the typical. It followed my childhood. 1976, I got a job with Xerox. Xerox was noted as the #1 company for Blacks to work in America. Xerox was noted for selling copiers, but I only sold copiers for a year. I got an Uber promotion into the medical division, selling zero radiography for breast cancer. Was fortunate to be the #1 sales rep worldwide 3 out of 4 years.
Amazing.
I worked at Xerox until they closed that medical division in '88. And because of my success, I had a lot of head hunters in the music industry calling. I became one of the first Blacks in 1988 with Philips to be an MRI and CT scanner, sales rep and marketing rep. And then in the ending of my career, I was one of the first to be a neurosurgical specialist with Johnson & Johnson. So I had the opportunity to sell capital equipment that has a huge selling cycle and marketing cycle. I had the opportunity to sell diagnostic imaging, which meant when I walked into the room with any radiologists or neurosurgeons, I had to go through 100 steps of, does this Black man know what the hell he's talking about?
I can only imagine people asking, yeah. And you worked through that. And that's why you're here today. And you mentioned about your history of, the corporate world, which many people that just see you on television or they hear about you, they don't know about, right? Because they haven't done that research or read the books, which I suggest read the books that Mr. Mathew Knowles has written, because he talks about this in the DNA of Achievers, about the history of his working in the corporate world.
You know, most people today, and especially our Black brothers and sisters, don't want to know history, don't want to know the truth.
That's right. Yeah.
Don't want to read. We are now conditioned by sound bites. We believe almost anything we hear on social media. While there's people that right now are conditioning us to believe certain things, because phase 3 of that is coming out soon and it costs more money. This is all planned marketing and planned engagement that we buy into every day. There's many intellectual people of any color in America today. Everybody is emotional because social media has made us emotional. It hasn't made us smarter. It's just made us want to argue a topic that we have no knowledge on. And in my classroom, I teach my students, if you ever want to lose an argument, I'll get you emotional. You'll always lose. Because when you stay calm and know your facts, you'll always win.
I love that. When you stay calm and you know your facts, you'll always win. And I love also how you brought the fact about, especially people not reading and understanding the power. Because I know when I spoke with you, you told me, you said, Adrian, research is a powerful tool for you, and you've got to do your research.
Exactly.
On anything. And I never forgot that. And I love that we're having this conversation, because I want people to know how amazing you are as not just, you're a leader and you're an innovator. And I love how you talk about social courage. But for our audience listening today, I want to just ask briefly about the DNA of Achievers and the traits behind that. And with your daughter, Beyonce, obviously she is a legendary pop singer. Did you find those traits in her at an early age?
Well, as time passed more and more, and it always organic, the universe always shows it. Interesting, the power of the universe. As time goes more and more, I think we will begin to see equally the talent of Solange.
Yes.
You know, I often, I feel saddened that she sometimes gets discounted when in fact, she is an extremely great singer-songwriter. She's a Grammy Award winner. She's had #1 records. And those are the top spectrum that you can have in the music industry. Winning a Grammy is like winning a Super Bowl. So you can't ignore, and it's really disrespectful to ignore any artist that's won a Grammy, not nominated for it, but won a Grammy. So I just want to point that out. And the older I get, the more I begin to question, even myself, that part of Solange and Beyonce's success is literally their real DNA. That the DNA between myself and my former wife is inside of them, and that DNA drives them to, even from a metabolic standpoint, a psychological standpoint, it drives them to be different. And this is something I'm beginning to research more and more on. What does the real DNA of one, how does that affect who we are? Now, there's external things that affect who we are. But I want to dig in deeper about the real DNA and how does that affect. And the external things is, my kids saw us work very hard. My kids saw us have success in business, failure in business. They had opportunities because we had a better financial platform than maybe some others' parents did. And so those are some of the external things. But again, I'm beginning to really question the real scientific part of DNA and what its role in success.
That is a very powerful question. Yeah, the role of DNA and success in general, the scientific portion of it. And that is something that I'm asking a question on too, because obviously when people are successful, there's something behind that. And there's much deeper than what we assume. And I also love the fact too that you brought up the notion of this, and for our audience as well too. I remember when I first met Mr. Knowles, and we talked. It was great to speak to him in person. And this man is an amazing father. And the reason why he said Solange and Beyonce, because he has two daughters. And whenever people are talking, they obviously say Beyonce's name, but it's like, no, Solange is also a very powerful, amazing Grammy Award-winning musician. And this is part of his life. He's raised two amazing geniuses, musical geniuses in this industry. So I want to thank you for bringing that up too, and also correcting me on that, because I want to make sure I include both at all times.
Thank you.
And so for today, Mr. Knowles, if you had one word of advice to the audience member ready to live their passion, because we talk about this, in whatever field of interest they choose, what would be a great first step and gem of wisdom for them to consider?
Well, the one word would be identify.
Oh, that's a new one. Identify. Okay.
Well, I listened very well. You said if there was one word, or giving you the one word, identify.
Identify.
But overall, I had to, and at some point, passions change. They don't always stay consistently the same, and for different reasons. For me in corporate America, when I day one started in corporate America, I said I would work 20 years in corporate America, day one.
Mm-hmm.
So I had already established the length of time I wanted to do it. And so by year 15, it was time for me to transition, had it in music or whatever. For me, passion is what you wake up in the morning and you're excited about. You go to bed at night, you're excited about. You don't mind doing an interview if only 10,000 people are gonna listen to it and hear it, or 10 million, because you just want to share information that hopefully can help someone, even if it's one person. I'm at the point now, if I could help one person, then I feel justified that I did something today that was meaningful and something that the universe will hold and share. So I think it's important to identify that passion. And that's simply, and the DNA of Achievers, what we don't talk about is it is a workbook. After each chapter, you have to go to work. And so I ask you, list your chapter, your passions. List them. What are your passions? What are some of the things that you are passionate about? And now let's go through those, because some of those are hobbies. It's important to know a hobby versus a passion. Now, I, at one point, had a large boat and loved to go out on that boat. I mean, I loved it. But that was a hobby. It wasn't a passion. I didn't wake up every day and just say, yeah, I want to go out on that boat. It was a pretty day. I wanted to go out on it, but it was not a pretty day. I didn't. See, passion, it was an ugly day. I still would want to go out.
I love that analogy.
I like to make it simple so you can understand. It was a bad rainy day. If I was passionate about boating, I would still want to go. I would probably want to go more because it'd be a different experience. I would want to experience what is a bad rainy day like. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That's true passion. And it makes me think too, when I wake up some days and I'm just like, no, where is your passion? And this is what is important to understand, everyone listening, about success, because success is a journey and you got to know what your passions are along this journey. And speaking of journey, Mr. Knowles, what has been one of your most difficult challenges along your journey to success? I know you're still on it because you're still growing, you're still achieving, but what has been one of your challenges?
Well, challenge for me is change. The world is changing, technology is changing, and staying up and with that change. The challenge for me is in the current environment that we live in. I see racism growing at a height that I never thought I would see after having President Obama. I see now a backlash from that. One of my biggest challenges is that, the world is changing, and the world would not look like it looked in 10 more years. And I think when you look at a snapshot of what the US Senate looks like, you see a photo of white men, average age 75. Is that really what America looks like? And why is there now this anger and hatred towards people of brown color? Why is that?
And why is that? Yeah.
Is it because you are frightened that your majority role and status is changing? Because yes, it is. Why is that? Why is it that whenever you think of Africa or Haiti, you look down on those countries, not understand the tremendous resources
that
those countries have? Or is it a Jedi trick that you do know that it's resources and you're trying to gentrify those countries so that you can take advantage of the resources? Is it that? Why is it we're so frightened about our Muslim brothers, but yet most of the shootings in America and killings have been from white people? So it's very clear when we see all of our young black men that have been killed simply by a police stop. Simply by a police stop. Or the fact that there's more black men in prison today than the height of slavery.
Wow.
And that's what frustrates me is sometimes, and especially the young generation, we get so excited about things that just aren't really that important because social media has really conditioned a lot of the young people.
I agree with you on that. They certainly have, and they've conditioned but distracted them from really seeing what's important to place their attention on. And I just had this conversation with someone the other day, Mr. Knowles, about this regarding that. Like, there's the incarceration of black men in America, and there was a recent shooting that happened, and they said on the news report, and this was done by a white man, a mass shooting, that he was safely captured. And I told someone, safely captured? Safely?
Yeah.
There's people getting shot that don't even have guns in their hand. And this guy got safely captured. So that is a rising concern. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's a challenge. And for the younger generation listening here, that Mr. Knowles has seen the transitions of time. And when we see people like him that are continually striving to grow and to expand and teach us, we got to listen and stop listening to the people who are not doing the things that are constructive for our environments, for our communities, and for our world. So thank you, Mr. Knowles, for being this powerful businessman, black man that's willing to step up and say what needs to be said because it counts. It's important. Thank you for that.
And the economic part of it counts as equally as much, that we learn to be better entrepreneurs.
Yes.
That we learn to have a part of capitalism as part of us as well, and not see it as a negative. Those that have money in America, they live a different life.
Certainly do. Our
white counterparts, when they want to start a new business, they don't fill out a credit report. No one asks them, what I want to get the credit report of your grandmother and your mother. They don't ask. I just want a business plan and some references. It's not about a credit report. We got to understand that we have to be the consumption of wealth. And how do we learn to have generations of wealth? It's a whole lot of things. And, one of the things, I want to transition into something that, if you don't mind,
I don't mind.
Leave with your audience. I just recently was announced 2 weeks ago. There's a company called Bungie, but it's spelled B-A-N-G-I, Bungie. that I'm now the chief marketing officer, we are a publicly traded company. Publicly traded. And what we do, we're one of the first, when we look at cannabis and hemp, we buy the property and then we lease back the property to the farmers and the dispensaries. And why is that important? It's because cannabis is a Control 1 substance still. And the Control 1 substance means that you cannot get monies from the bank. The federal banks will not make loans. And so we found a niche in the market. We call it now the green rush, just like we had the rush years ago. Because our counterparts get into these businesses early. When Black folks learn about something, we're paying $80, $90 a share versus $4 a share, penny stock. And so that's the thing that I'm really focused on as well right now is Bungie. And you can go to Bangi Inc., BangiStock.com, BANGI stock.com. Find out all about it.
Okay. And this is why you're a successful businessman, because you're looking at ways of how do I get into this market? How do I use it to my benefit to help others? And I love that. And Mr. Knowles, but why not just say, hey, I've arrived. I got the money, the status, the relationships. Why continue to build business relationships and capital in this industry that you're in now and even music? Why continue to do that?
And that's a good question because I'm sure my kids don't need it. My standing joke is I'm going to spend every penny because I'm not leaving Beyonce and Solange anything. So it's a good question because it goes back to I'm passionate about it.
Okay.
I'm passionate about waking up in the morning, coming up with new marketing strategies, new ideas. Next week, I start the new semester at Prairie View A&M.
Okay.
I'm teaching there this semester. I taught 8 years at Texas Southern and 2 years at Fisk. I lectured last year. I lectured at Howard, at Harvard, at Cornell, at the University of Cape Town, Alabama A&M, all over. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed lecturing. As you know, I do a ton of public speaking. By the way, if any of your audience would like to know how to reach me, just go to my website, MathewKnowles.com. Okay. With one T, MathewKnowles.com, and you can sign up about public speaking. Love that. And that's what I live for. I live for that. I live for working with young people, students, because this is my 12th year of teaching. And I tell every day, I'm not here to teach, let's say the course is artist management. I'm here first to teach critical thinking. Critical thinking. That's what I'm here first. Because that's the number one thing, especially lacking with our Black brothers and young Black brothers and sisters, is the ability to critical think. Then I teach the course.
And you mentioned, I'm going to go back to what you were saying about emotions we talked about earlier. If you can control somebody's emotions, you got them. And so this critical thinking portion comes into understanding that about, are you being driven by emotion or are you using logic? Are you actually trying to analyze this situation the right way?
Exactly. And that's why in my books aren't the typical. My books are based on research, based on giving information that you didn't know before. That now when you put it all together, there's a aha moment. Like, for example, in the emancipation of slaves through music.
Yes.
I'm older, but you might have gone to some old Southern churches where people, when they get out, in the church and they want to go out to use the bathroom, something, they raise their finger up. You ever seen that?
I've seen that.
So in Emancipation of Slaves Through Music, I go and I go back to the years of slavery and what music meant to the slaves and how they survived through that.
Mm-hmm.
When they were in the church, and by the way, the slave master used the church against the slaves because he made them think that if they didn't do what the slave master wanted, they were really sinning against God. But
wow.
But here, the slaves, if they went out of the church during the church session, sermon, which was only typical to use the restroom, they had to raise their finger. At the back of the church would be the guards with their guns and stuff, and they have a piece of paper, and they would just line 1, 2, 3, and then 5, 4, 5, so that they could keep up and have a quick visual look on, okay, it's 19 people that's supposed to be here. There's 19, there's one out. That's how they kept up with our movement inside of this facility, was by you had to raise your finger as you walked out. To me, that's ridiculous. Yeah. I don't want to be raising my finger, just acknowledging abstract and the process of slavery that humiliated us, but yet we do it because we don't know.
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know. And this is part of that critical thinking you were talking about, using our minds for something more constructive and looking at what's there and paying attention to it. This is amazing information, Mr. Knowles, and you've taught us so much today. I know our audience has taken many notes. I've taken notes. And if you haven't taken notes, then you better go back and listen to this and take notes and implement into your life, because what you don't implement does not work. Mr. Knowles, you're a busy man. What do you do to relax or have fun while being away from the paparazzi, never-ending traveling arrangements, multiple artists, persistent podcasters pursuing you like me? What do you do to get away from all this ruckus and just to have some relaxation for you? Because you're human. I mean, I know you need to have that.
The speaking part to me is kind of like an artist performing. Like, artists work so hard, but what is their reward is when they're on the stage. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I'm on the stage, that's a reward for me. I enjoy that. I get this energy. I kind of change gears and I'm in it, So that's a reward for me. That, okay. The traveling is easier because my wife travels with me, and we try to make every place that we go, because we have the opportunity to go to many cities and countries, to have that an experience and learn, and kind of like we're on a vacation. I don't just go one place and then leave the next day. We explore and learn. Yes. So I actually take the negatives and turn them into positives.
Love that. Take the negatives and you turn them into positives. And I know you have mad shoe game too. When I was in Italy, I saw the shoes on Mr. Knowles. Let me tell you, this guy's got some shoe game. Don't mess with him.
My shoe game, I'm all about my shoe game. I ain't gonna lie. Shoe game, critical.
I love it. I love it. Actually, you inspired me to get my shoe game. I'm like, man, I can't even come around Mr. Knowles on my shoes. I got to hide mine somewhere. But I love the fact that you have that part of you too, because, and you mentioned before, passion. You love what you do, and you know when to have fun when you're somewhere. You were mentioning you and your wife, Gina, you guys you present. You stay there for a little while, you enjoy the area, and then you move on from it. And that's part of living. Living your passion is doing the work, but loving what you do, but still having some fun along the way. And I love that, Mr. Knowles. We come to the part of the show here. It's called the Courageous Creator Question. And the reason why I call it the Courageous Creator Question is because I think deeply about the person that's on the show. And I personalize this question just for them, based off what I've learned and based off what I understand. And for you today, the question I have is, what does it mean to live your passion?
What it means for me, and I'm smiling. I'm smiling because I say gratified and blessed
yes.
that when I wake up, I don't have to do anything. I only do what I want to do. Mm. That is and I don't say that with arrogance. That's why I say I'm blessed. If I don't want to do something, I don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at a part of my life that I have the financial support that I can just say, no, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, I'll do what I like. And what I like will be my passion.
I love that. Do what you like. I love that. That's passion for you, ladies and gentlemen.
And not having to do something. A lot of people would like to live their passion, but they're forced to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
Many times when I'm doing seminars, they say, well, this is my passion, but right now I have to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just saying, I'm fortunate that I don't have to worry about that part.
Mm-hmm.
I can just do what I want, which is my passion.
Love that. Do what you want, which is your passion. The audience today, are you doing what you want? Or are you doing what someone's telling you to do? Or are you doing what you think you have to do? Are you actually happy about what you do? Mr. Knowles mentioned earlier, when you get out in that boat, if you like boats, if you really have a passion for boating and you get out, even when the storm's out there, that's passion. Knowing that it's out there and you want to enjoy the experience. And so
I would be remiss if we didn't really break this down a little slower. Some people have a tremendous passion.
Mm-hmm.
But today, this moment, they can't do it because of things that are surrounding them, economic things, family things that won't allow them, even the finances, to do their passion. So there has to be a word transition to passion.
Transition.
That we learn, because some people have to transition to passion. I transitioned to passion. I didn't just one day say, I'm going to work in the music industry. Mm-hmm. I went back to Houston Community College. Mm-hmm. I took 4 courses in the business aspect of music business. I went to probably 25 seminars, asked every question I was allowed to ask. Mm-hmm. Then I got into music industry. So it's important to transition and not just think, because you'll be really disappointed if you think one day, bam, you can go and do this. Sometimes you have to intern if you want to work in the music industry. And that means working for free. Mm-hmm. So I just want to make sure that people understand that there's a transition to passion.
I love that. And that's something I'm going to keep in my book too as well. Transition to passion. Yeah. And it reminds me, I'm glad you said that, because I worked in a call center for 8 years before I got into what I'm doing now. And I realized being in the call center, answering phone calls and doing all those things led to my ability to be able to speak with people and do interviews. So that transition was very important for me. And so thank you so much, Mr. Knowles, for your presence and time today on this interview. And for our audience, there's a few things I want you to know about Mr. Knowles. So Mr. Knowles, go to his website, Mathew Knowles, that's 1T, MathewKnowles.com. And if you're interested, have him come and speak. I mean, I had the pleasure of being in front of him, and let me tell you, it was life-changing. So go to MathewKnowles.com. The books we talked about today, I encourage you highly to get those books, read them, learn them, implement them into your life. We talked about the racism in the eyes of a child, the DNA of achievers, and the emancipation of slaves through music. Make sure you go and get those books. And we also have the Destiny's Child musical, which I talked about earlier, is coming out in 2020. So some updates for everyone to know that as well, too. And there's also, I believe, a release of music coming up from Mr. Knowles here. I believe this is the Certified Classics celebrates 20th anniversary of Destiny's Child, The Writings on the Wall.
That was started last week.
Last week.
2020, though, however, is the year of Destiny's Child. We'll have a musical.
Yes.
First unreleased album that they recorded in 1992.
Wow.
And we will have Destiny's Child merchandise that are released. We have a new Destiny's Child video game coming out in 2020. And my book, Destiny's Child, An Untold Story.
Okay.
In 2020. So 2020 is the year of Destiny's Child.
Perfect. All right. And to keep up with Mr. Knowles, he's on social media. You can go to his Facebook page, go to Instagram. He's on Instagram as well, too, Mr. Mathew Knowles, and his website, MathewKnowles.com. Go there, follow him, learn. Because if you do this, I'm telling you, your life will change. There's a reason why he's here today. Mr. Knowles, I want to thank you for being on this show as a courageous creator and being the person that you are today.
Well, thank you so much. There's two things I want to leave the audience with.
Okay.
One is the opportunity for wealth. So I will ask them if they'll go to bungystock.com. That's spelled BANGI, stock.com.
Okay.
Just read it. The second thing is I always like to leave someone with something positive to remember.
Okay.
I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to tell a story. I travel a lot, as you know. And I was in Los Angeles this particular time, and I was going down the escalator, and this nun from Mexico had a bowl, and she had taped on the bowl a note, "Please give to the missionary." Of course, missionary was misspelled, but that's not the point. So I gave, and the key is we all have a threshold that we give to it hurt. To some people that could be $1, to somebody else could be $10,000. But I gave with what my threshold was. And she gave me, this nun, a card. And I have a really bad habit of not reading the back of the card and put it in a couple pair of blue jeans and changing. And then one day I read the back of the card. And that's what I want to leave your listeners with. Mm-hmm. It said, pray not for a life free from trouble. Pray for triumph over trouble. For what you call adversity, God in the universe calls opportunity. You know, we often pray that no bad stuff happens. That's not realistic. Mm-hmm. Pray for when it does happen, you're prepared. Pray for when it does happen, that you see inside of it an opportunity to even be better.
Powerful. You see in it an opportunity to be better. There we have it, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mathew Knowles. And I encourage you all to listen to this as much as possible, to go to MathewKnowles.com and to read the books, support. But until then, I encourage you all to be that courageous creator in your life.